Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome once again to Full Fat Spoiler Chat, the show in which we talk about a recent piece of nerdy entertainment and we look at it in depth. We talk about what's good about it, what's bad about it, what worked, what didn't work, what we think are the larger themes, tone of the movie, the messages, and so on. To do that, we have to go in depth on this movie, this series, whatever it is we're talking about. And that means we spoil it, hence all of these warnings all around. If you saw the thumbnail, if you saw the description, if you saw the event on Facebook, you know what this is. Tonight we're talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, which means if you have not seen Spider-Man No Way Home and you hate spoilers, you probably should wait until after you've seen that movie before you come back and watch this. If you have seen it, and or you don't care about spoilers, then absolutely hang around in the chat. Let us know what you think about the movie. Let us know what you think about our opinions on the movie. And just have a good time. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber. On Facebook and Instagram, I'm First Person Shooter as a cosplay photographer. I am Burley_Adopter on Twitter, a couple of other places, doing a bunch of other things. And already in the YouTube chat, Christy Lou, hello, welcome to the show, welcome to the chat, and there's that warning, we're going to be spoiling Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't seen it, and you don't like spoilers, you should probably come back later. Before we get into talking about the movie itself, we're going to do the real quick first promo. We are trying to develop a larger group of followers on Twitch. So if you have a Twitch account, we'd love to have you go to that URL that's on your screen right there right now, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber, and consider following us. We have a wonderful interactive following on Facebook, with Facebook Live, and on YouTube, and love to get to that point as well on Twitch. So twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. All right. So what is Spider-Man No Way Home? Well, it's a movie. It is, I'll bring up one of the images here, one that we used for teasers before. It is the story of Spider-Man, Tom Holland playing Spider-Man for the third time, the third movie in the Sony licensed and Marvel created and produced and directed Spider-Man series. As you may recall, it was the deal started when Marvel really wanted to use Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, and they worked out a deal, said, hey, well, okay, we'll make us a Spider-Man movie. Sony still has the rights to Spider-Man and all of its Spider-Man universe characters, and they said, we'll see where it goes. That was 3 movies ago. It went so well that Marvel and Sony had a big PR kerfuffle after the first movie. Basically, they were renegotiating deals for how much money each one was going to make off of it, the back end, and everybody was happy. Spider-Man wound up in the 2 Avengers Infinity Saga movies, and Marvel kept making Spider-Man movies for Sony. And Sony is also making its own Spider-Man universe character movies. And if you really want to, tomorrow you can go see Morbius, because it hits theaters tomorrow. The Living Vampire. Yeah, anyway. So, sum up the plot real quickly, because, even though this is a spoiler chat, I'm certainly not going to go over the entire plot and, spoil it. I will mention things about the plot based on the idea that you have seen it. But basically the gist of this movie is, as you've seen in any of the trailers, at the end of Far From Home, the last Spider-Man movie, Mysterio, before he dies, releases a video where he basically outs Peter Parker as Spider-Man. It winds up in the hands of the media, including J. Jonah Jameson, who in this version is still played by J.K. Simmons from the original, which is wonderful. But in this version, he's more like an InfoWars Alec Jones type, crazy conspiracy theory, web streaming, YouTube channel, nut job kind of guy. But of course, he picks it up as, Spider-Man's a menace. This is how they do the Spider-Man's a menace thing in the modern day. This causes an awful lot of problems for not only Peter, but everybody connected to him that, knows, that people know are good friends of Peter's or, part of his inner circle, particularly MJ. And the movie, this is also in the trailer, right out of the gate, they try to flee this crowds and the news helicopters and everything. This is them on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, which is probably not a great place to flee. Ultimately, they wind up finding they can get some respite on the roof of their school for some reason. But the story then proceeds to Peter asking Doctor Strange for help to try to cast a spell that causes everybody to forget that he was Peter Parker. And in the course of trying to say, well, maybe not this person, maybe not that person, and so on, Peter basically screws up the spell. They're not really sure what goes wrong. Something happens, but very quickly, when Peter runs into Doc Ock, as he's trying to catch up with they're all applying to college because they're all graduating high school. Peter, they all get turned down for their first choice, which is MIT, because MIT doesn't want that kind of beef around. And he's going to try to intercept the recruiter from MIT, and does so on a bridge as that person is taking an Uber or a car or whatever out to the airport. And of course, as we've seen in the trailer, runs into Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2 back in the early 2000s. The Sam Raimi movies, the first trilogy, Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, and it's Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock. And the movie proceeds from there with Spider-Man discovering and Doctor Strange discovering that all of these villains from alternate versions, alternate universes, other aspects of the multiverse are coming into this universe. The actual big conflict here is that Strange comes up pretty quickly with a way to send them back, but Spider-Man, in talking to Doc Ock, realizes that they all came from where they were into his universe, his part of the multiverse, just at the moment where they will die in their own universe. And if he sends them back, he's sending them back to absolutely guaranteed and pretty much instant death. And so the conflict is, Peter doesn't want to do this. Well, he's kind of iffy on it, but he gets convinced by both Ned and MJ, and most importantly, Aunt May, that, saving them is the right thing to do. And that's ultimately the conflict, where he tries, and then some people aren't, some of the villains aren't particularly that keen on it. Things go south. It's very exciting. So, with that all said, Harry, welcome to the show. Again, I'm sure you know because you've seen the teaser and everything. We are spoiling Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't seen it and you don't like the spoilers, you should probably wait. Come back and watch this after you've seen it. But otherwise, hang around. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think of my opinion and or the movie in general. So, what did I like about this? Larger structural aspects of it. The pacing is wonderful. It's 2 hours and 28 minutes long, 2.5 hours, and it did not seem to drag at all. Despite the fact that there are an awful lot of beats of this story that they've got to put into place. They have to give the villains their appropriate time. They have to give the build-up of the villains their appropriate time. As villains, they have to give an appropriate amount of time to the structure of trying to help them. Luminous, welcome to the show, and good. I'm glad you've actually already seen this one. And then, they have to give plenty of time for, and this is the big spoiler, but it's been out there forever anyway, for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man from the Amazing Spider-Man movies and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man from the original Spider-Man trilogy. Again, directed by Sam Raimi, and this one is directed by Sam Raimi. They brought him back. No, wait, I've got that wrong. This one is directed again by John Watts, who has done all of the other ones. What is Raimi doing? Raimi is doing something else for the Spider Universe. Anyway, so they have to give them enough time to have very interesting aspects of their story and be an integral part to this story, as well as doing a very good job of, getting closure, of enhancing, at least, their original stories from their original sets of movies. And they do an excellent job with that pacing. That's an awful lot to cram into one movie. When you think about how they tried to cram so much into Spider-Man 3, with Venom, with Sandman, with Hobgoblin, assuming that's what they called him, it was just, it didn't work. I mean, it was just way too busy, and the story didn't integrate. In here, literally every aspect of the story integrates right from the very beginning, when the inciting incident that drives Peter to try to do this and sets up the whole, that's it, Raimi is doing the next Doctor Strange. Thank you, Luminous. And sets up the whole screw-up is Peter trying to help his friends get into MIT. Maybe himself, but mostly his friends. Because he sees it as he screwed up in, keeping them from getting into MIT. And ultimately, that story thread continues to come back and is the entire reason why all of these things, both amazing and terrible and and exciting, happen throughout the course of this movie. So it's constructed as a story very well. You don't ever think that any of these characters are an add-on, with the exception of the Lizard. He's kind of an add-on. I think they just threw him in there because they wanted to get another Amazing Spider-Man villain in here, or an Amazing Spider-Man villain in here. Another, because they've got Electro. And obviously they're not going to bring back Dane DeHaan. Please don't. And they certainly aren't going to bring back the Rhino, because he's in for 5 seconds. So it's wonderfully paced. The story is really tightly constructed. It veers from very funny. There's some really funny moments. When Octavius introduces himself, or says his real name is Dr. Otto Octavius, and the 3 high school kids just laugh at him. Harry Brady, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness brings Doctor Strange into more trouble with the variants of Doctor Strange and Wanda connecting to the Illuminati and the X-Men in the Doctor Strange sequel. Yes. Yeah. Probably the Illuminati and probably the X-Men. We do know for sure that it's Patrick Stewart. They have finally confirmed that. And, of course, Charles Xavier is one of the members of the Illuminati. This is a separate topic, Harry, but yes. So, the plot, the performances are all good, as they always have been. As I've seen other things that Tom Holland does, I'm kind of in the moving towards the same position that some of my friends and my niece all hold, that they're not particularly fond of Tom Holland as an actor. I think he is outstanding as Peter Parker. I think he is, and Spider-Man. I mean, he's just, I think, perfect. But I don't know if he's necessarily a great actor. In this role, he is great and has been for 3 movies now, or, well, 5, actually. 6, actually, if you count the other MCU stuff. And he just acts his ass off in this movie. I mean, really, if you think he emoted heavily in Far From Home, nothing close to what he does in this movie. But everybody else is really good. Everybody who comes back into their previous roles is really good. And it's really nice to see Jamie Foxx do something a little different with Electro. Basically playing the character more like it seems like he thinks the character should have been played. That's a good thing. But among all of these excellent performances, Willem Dafoe, his updated take on Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin it's jaw-dropping. He is so much more frightening as the Goblin, so much more brutal as the Goblin in this movie than he was in Spider-Man. He is so much more... He turns Norman Osborn into a sympathetic, tragic character at the level of Alfred Molina's Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. And it is just an absolutely fantastic performance. I love Willem Dafoe in just about everything, and this is... Frankly, if there's ever going to be any consideration for any kind of Oscar nod for a superhero movie, he should get it for this. Well, actually, it's not true, obviously. Posthumously, oh God, just completely lost his name. Joker from The Dark Knight. I want to know what's going to happen for Tom Holland's Spider-Man in his next trilogy for John Watts. If there's going to be a next trilogy, I haven't read anything about that. And Harry is excited for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, as am I. Believe me, I'm a Doctor Strange, first comic book literally I ever read. And I've been a Doctor Strange fan ever since. So I'm very excited for finally getting a sequel. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Even if you don't particularly care for superhero movies, for Willem Dafoe's performance. It's just, out there. Let's see, what else? The other things that you would normally comment on, the special effects are generally great. I'll get into one that isn't so much so. The music is good and exciting, and I don't think there's much to stand out. The needle drops are pretty good. When it starts out with Izimbra by Talking Heads, one of my favorite Talking Heads tracks, that really caught my attention. And I'm like, they're going with this? I'm there. And the rest of the needle drops are pretty good. But that just put me in the right mood right out of the gate. And that pretty much wraps up. I'm sure I'll think of other things as I start talking about things that I didn't particularly care for. Not that that's going to be a very long segment. But so I'm going to move into things we didn't care for, or things I didn't particularly care for. What didn't work. The first one is the special effects work and general the treatment of the Lizard. They changed the character design a bit. The design on paper, assuming I saw it on paper, looks better than the sort of Goomba-looking thing that was in Spider-Man or Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm sorry, the original Amazing Spider-Man. The realization of that design is surprisingly not as sharp and up to date as the previous version. Again, if I was looking at a static shot of that, I'd go, that's a much better looking lizard. Watching it move, and it's pretty obvious that in the case of both Thomas Hayden Church for Sandman and Rhys Ifans for the Lizard, or Curt Connors, that was all done CG. Of course, it makes sense. And they were never anywhere near a set. I mean, they basically just did voice work somewhere, and it got put into, matched with these CG characters. And you can kind of tell, really with Lizard, not quite so much with Thomas Hayden Church, with Sandman. So that's another thing I didn't particularly care for. I think that was sloppy. Sound is never an issue with Marvel movies. They don't make mistakes like that. And I don't know, just because this was so big an undertaking that, just something obviously had to give to be able to make it through COVID production to an actual release date. I don't know. And did it damage my enjoyment of the movie? Hardly at all. I could care less. It's just one of those things you go, okay, all right, I get it. I see. This is not where a particular big chunk of your $200 million budget went. Let's see, is anything else? I think... So this isn't so much a thing I didn't like. It's a thing that you're going to notice. Like I said, I think Tom Holland acts his butt off in this. He's amazing. Andrew Garfield is so far above both Tobey Maguire and even Tom Holland as an actor. It stands out. Thank God they give him plenty to do, and his Spider-Man is probably the most interesting, aside from our hero, Tom Holland, of course. He's however many years it is after, he lost Gwen. In those years, he has become a bitter, violent Spider-Man. And it's portrayed really well. And he has an amazing sort of cathartic moment in the movie that just Garfield sells it. He kills in it. It's wonderful. When you get to the big final battle in which, and it's the scene that you've seen in the trailer, so it's Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard, all trying to stop the attempt to, save them by curing them, and sending them back to their own universe as a better person. It's a big battle, a bunch of scaffolding, in this case around the Statue of Liberty. Nice callback to Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They're putting the big shield up on the Statue of Liberty. I think that was really cool. And they're also setting up the Armor Wars. Something that Happy just sort of mentions very early on in the movie. So they're doing a great job integrating all sorts of different things about the various aspects of the MCU into this, like they always do. But in this case, it doesn't seem to be like a setup, specifically just a setup for something else. It's just a drop, and you go, oh, that's about this thing that's going to happen. And it's really neat. So that's another thing I like. The Easter eggs are small, very cool. The Easter eggs for current MCU stuff or planned MCU stuff are small, very cool, and very interesting. The other thing that I didn't particularly care for is the end credit scene. So it basically reverses the end credit scene of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Eddie and Venom wind up, they're, again, spoilers, they're in Peter Parker, they're in the MCU universe, with the Tom Holland Peter Parker at the end of Venom: Let There Be Carnage, and here something happens. They're in a diner watching all this stuff happen, and they wind up going back to their regular universe. But at the end, they leave just a little bit. The piece of the symbiote is there. And it's like that seemed. Why did you do? Now, granted, the MCU had nothing to do with Let There Be Carnage, but Sony, why did you let the MCU make this change? Now, I would guess it's because the deal is done. I would imagine that it was a 3-picture deal, that the integration between Sony's intellectual property licensed Spider-Man stuff and the MCU or Marvel Studios is done. And they can't have Venom in the MCU, but they were willing to allow a piece of the symbiote into the MCU to let Marvel possibly do something with that in a future deal or in a future movie. Which, sort of gets to Harry's question about what's going to happen next for Tom Holland Spider-Man. I mean, they leave it at a point where this could be the end. He could be walking away. He's not walking away from Spider-Man. He is still Spider-Man. They make that very clear. But as far as a Spider-Man that has access to Stark technology, or wants to have access to it, they make it pretty clear that may not be a thing anymore. And so they set it up so that if there no further deals are done, that this could be it. This could be all that's said and done for Tom Holland Spider-Man, or an MCU Spider-Man. This movie has already made $1.8 billion globally and $800 million domestically. They're going to make another deal. Nobody is going to leave that kind of money on the table. So, Harry, to your point, I don't know that they've announced another trilogy. There will be other movies that are made by Marvel and released by Sony under their licensing. No, any executive that doesn't make a deal would probably be removed by their board. Because that would be literally fiscal irresponsibility. And that's pretty much it with the things that I didn't particularly care about for this movie. Is mostly sort of the special effects stuff. Here's one of the things that's really weird. In this shot, where'd my mouse go? There we go. Of Doc Ock and Spidey after their fight, and here we go, Luminous. My favorite part was seeing Doc Ock again. Molina was great, brought back fond memories and made new ones. I agree. I think Alfred Molina jumped right back into that role. He's a great actor anyway. But here, the de-aging that they used that's in this, screen grab, because this is from the movie, looks so much better than the de-aging that they generally use in most of his other shots. Even his hair looks better. And I thought that was a weird thing. Again, they're really good at this. Particularly if they branched out into other Disney expertise, and went with the face replacement stuff, that turned Mark Hamill, or not Mark Hamill, into Mark Hamill in the book of Not Mandalorian. And I guess that's a spoiler for that, but we already talked about that. So that's pretty much it. I do have to say, I absolutely loved when the first trailers dropped. I think this was in the second trailer, and everybody saw this and just went, oh my god, it's a magic suit as well. It is, in fact, he's using magic, but that's the bracer thing that he's wearing. This is literally just the regular suit turned inside out. When I discovered that's what it was, when they have that moment in the movie, I was like, thank God. That just everybody's going nuts trying to figure out. It's like, oh, this is some sort of special designed, strange magic suit. Nope. He got paint all over the front of of the suit, and before he could wash it, he had to go do stuff, so he turned it inside out. That simple. So, theme, tone, messages. So the tone of this movie is darker than either of the previous two. The first one wasn't particularly dark. The second one started getting into a little bit of dealing with grief and loss, with the loss of Tony Stark. And his own insecurities with the sort of nightmares that Mysterio put him in, things like that. This movie dives head first into grief and loss and dark themes. Andrew Garfield is still dealing with the loss of Gwen Stacy. Peter Parker is dealing with the loss of his future and his friends' future. His actions have prevented them from getting into the college that they really should be in, at least up to this point. There's an awful lot here. There's the idea of the loss of these people who were, for whatever reason, most of them tragically turned into villains. Even Electro fell into a vat of electric eels. They are not inherently necessarily evil people. Certainly not Sandman. So the theme of so the loss of your agency, your ability to decide good or bad for yourself because of the things that have happened to you, happened to Electro, happened to Norman kind of did it to himself, but he didn't know what was going to happen really. And certainly to Doc Ock, that was absolutely a tragic, terrible mistake on his part. But then, and here's again the huge spoiler, great big monster spoiler. If you haven't seen it, here it comes. Osborn as the Goblin. Well, actually, he's not even wearing any Goblin, so he's wearing the Goblin armor. He destroyed the mask. Kills Aunt May. And so we have to watch Holland's Parker deal with the loss of Aunt May in a way that's so much more tragic and moving and painful than even Maguire's, dealing with the death of Uncle Ben. But two things that are, I think, the most important themes coming out of this are you can and you have to get past tragedy. And Tobey Maguire's role in this movie is predominantly to be that person who learned how to get past the tragedy of the death of Uncle Ben and become a better person. And he doesn't help Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker so much. That actually comes in something that Garfield himself does. But he definitely helps Tom Holland's Peter Parker in overcoming the rage and the grief and the sense of loss. But the biggest message out of here, and it's almost blatantly stated by Aunt May, is a modification to with great power comes great responsibility. She does finally say that, and they all get that. Prior to that, she says the thing that modifies that. Your job as a hero is to save people, including the bad guys. Your job is to save people, not just stop bad guys. And that is ultimately what the theme of this particular movie is about. That this Spider-Man, and therefore in their view, Certainly Spider-Man's world, if not the greater MCU ultimately, should be about saving everybody, including the bad guys, as opposed to just stopping bad guys. If you want to just stop bad guys, you're Frank Castle, you're Punisher. And they do an excellent job of making that point right up until the very end, before the denouement of the movie. That's 100% clear. That's the message. That's the theme. That's what this movie is about. Now that we sort of wrapped all of that up, I think I want to get back just a little bit before I tie this up with Harry's comment about where this is going in the future. So we do know that, even though I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not sure that I'm going to right away, we do know that Morbius has characters from the MCU version of Spider-Man. We have the Vulture, which was in Homecoming, Scorpion, who appeared in Homecoming. There are definitely going to be characters in that movie that tie into the MCU, which implies that Morbius, again, I haven't seen it, takes place in the MCU. And if that's the case, that's an interesting part of the overall deal, because Venom made it clear that it didn't, and certainly Let There Be Carnage made it clear that it didn't, because at the end, in the end credit scene, Eddie actually goes to the Peter Parker, Tom Holland universe. They are separate parts of the multiverse. So I like I said, they're going to make some sort of deal. Whether or not it's Sony says, all right, Tom Holland wants out, so we're going to move on, and Marvel, can you make us 3 Miles Morales movies? I'm sure that they could. Whatever the deal is, there will be another deal. It's going to happen, and it will involve, a Spider-Man in the MCU. The other really interesting reveal, and again, this is another big but important but very small spoiler in the nature of the story, is of course the return of Charlie Cox as Daredevil. As Matt Murdock. So he is no different whatsoever from Matt Murdock in the Netflix series. He performs it the same, he's written the same. In the Hawkeye series, and again, we've done the spoiler chat for Hawkeye. If you haven't seen Hawkeye, I'm sure you've seen the pictures. Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin is in the last couple of episodes of the Hawkeye series. Actually referenced, and you actually see his hand in previous episodes. But and he stated in various interviews that this is very much a character that is strongly connected to and influenced by his performance in the Netflix series, but it's also clearly slightly different. It seems like this Kingpin is powered. Possibly super strong, super tough, to some extent, like maybe super soldier level, not stopping bullets with his teeth level, or Superman bouncing off his eyeballs level. But Charlie Cox's Daredevil, so much as we don't see Daredevil, we only see Matt Murdock, but his Matt Murdock is no different. It is exactly the same character. So that implies that the Netflix characters, certainly Matt Murdock, but the Netflix characters in general could be coming into the MCU. And there's been a ton of rumor that Matt Murdock is going to make an appearance in She-Hulk, because Jennifer is a lawyer, and I'm very excited to see them do that. I would love to have all of them and their actors come back. Kristen Ritter was wonderful as Jessica Jones. I really would love to see her come back as Jessica Jones. I think that would be fantastic. But anyway, so I think that pretty much wraps up both or all of not only our usual full fat spoiler chat stuff, but some speculation about what's going to happen going forward. Thank you all for joining us. Before I leave with our usual wrap-ups, I'll put up our usual promo at the end, which is to ask you to please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/nerdcaliber. If you go there and you decide that you would like to be a patron, we'd certainly love to have you. Just 3 tiers, $2 is the lowest tier. That money takes us to, ideally, new cons, more cons that we could possibly get to in a regular year. So, patreon.com/nerdcaliber. Upcoming shows. Still working on what we're going to be doing for Anime Octane on Monday. Again, all the winter anime shows are wrapping up. So we may just do a winter wrap-up. What is our favorites out of the winter 2022? What was surprises, etc. You know what? That's what it's going to be. So, Anime Octane Monday is going to be winter 2022 final wrap-up. Big surprises, big wins, big losses. Did we have an X-arm from last winter? Almost, but not quite. So yeah, join us then. Of course, Nerd Week Live at our next Tuesday show. And I should know this right off the top of my head, but I don't. But I've got the image right here. Oh yeah. Interesting. Our next full fat spoiler chat will be the HBO Max movie Moonshot. May 12th. So tune into that, folks. We hope to see you at an upcoming con, Wicked Comic Con in less than 2 weeks, April 9th, Weston Waterfront in South Boston. PAX East, 21st through the 24th in the BCEC attached to the Weston Waterfront in South Boston. Our panel, Cosplay and Photography Shootout, Arachnid Theater, all the way to the back of level 2, top floor, if you're walking in, right-hand side. And 7:30 p.m., please show up. You'll have a ball, even if you're just watching a bunch of photographers and cosplayers running around trying to take pictures in a really short amount of time. Then at the end of May, of course, in May Boston, I'll be running the photo department. I'll be in the photo cosplay studio suite, room 102, right around the corner from the rotunda, from the Community Row area. So we will not have a table in Community Row. You can find Nerd Caliber while wandering around, our press guys, but also in that studio, room 102. So we'll see you at one of those upcoming cons. Stay safe, folks. I can't tell you how glad I am that it's actually more than twice the temperature at this point at the end of this show than the last show on Tuesday. New England weather in the spring. Yay! All right. Good night. Stay safe.